Hello there, everybody, and welcome to our latest Star Wars Lads book review. We are talking about the High Republic Phase 2, finally, after a long time of covering it. We're talking about Path of Deceit today, the first young adult book in Phase 2. It's starting off with a young adult book this time, written by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. Tessa Gratton, a newbie in the High Republic, but Justina Ireland, very much so a veteran of Phase 1 of the High Republic. So, what did we think about it? Well, you're about to find out, but before we do so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel for continued Star Wars content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please, it will really help us out. We're on the march to 1,000 subs, and every single subscriber really counts. It's the way for you to show that you really enjoy our content and you want to see more. Then let us know also in the comments if you enjoyed this book, and if you enjoy our book reviews, let us know what you think of Path of Deceit down below. We will be doing our traditional Star Wars Lads book reviews where we discuss non-spoilers first and then get into a bit of the spoilers after we give it a score and a rating out of 5. So let's dive into the High Republic Path of Deceit. Sanak, what were your thoughts on the latest book in the High Republic?
I think it was always a bit of a gamble to go back in time after just how tightly focused phase one was for at max like a 1 to 1.5 year period, especially with that finale ending in the Fallen Star and how it was all kind of wrapped up in Eye of the Storm with those big revelations of Mark Rowe now basically owning much of the Outer Rim, kind of picket fencing himself in and killing off so many Jedi at their beacon of hope and all that. And we all want to go back. And then finding out the news that phase two was not a continuation, but actually going back 150 years or so, or 200 years or so, was shocking. But I like this book quite a bit. Um, I think it certainly helps that there are some nice connective tissues like formed between phase one and phase two in this book immediately. But I think the biggest advantage of this book is that you can just pick it up and read it. It's a very small scale story. It paces itself quite well. Um, it's not anything that is like galaxy changing until maybe its later moments. But even then, it doesn't seem like it's all there. Where versus where Light of the Jedi, we start off with a bang with the Great Disaster, destroying planets, hyperspace objects, flying, killing so many people across the galaxy. This is not anywhere near that. But it, yeah, I mean, it's nice having like not as like engrossing or explosive as a read. It's nice just being able to settle in, take my time with the book, and then feel excited for what the adult novel will eventually give us and what the junior novel will give us. This might be, I'd say, overall, the one most focused on what the grander plot of Phase Two will be. Like this feels like the beginnings of that. But we have seen at Celebration and with like all the news releases for everything in Phase Two, there's gonna be a lot more emphasis on exploration of the Jedi and like communication issues, while they're more working with the Pathfinders like the Santekas and working with other Republic officials. So I think this was like a nice transition point, and it certainly gets me excited for what comes next.
I think you hit the word that I wanted to talk about, which is transition. And I think this phase 2 is a transition phase. It's kind of, it almost feels like that, Book of Boba Fett type phase where it's kind of Mandalorian, but we're waiting for Mandalorian season 3 and it's kind of our stopgap. Phase 2 feels like it's the stopgap between phase 1 and phase 3. It's going to give us some cool backstory. It's going to give us some interesting connections, maybe furthering some plots that we don't get the full extent of in phase 1, which will enhance and enrich phase 3. But so far, it doesn't seem like it's going to be the phase that's going to change the game or anything like that. And I enjoyed the smaller scale beginnings of the story. I ended up really liking this story. At the start, it felt a little safe, a little small, and a little familiar. And I think picked up and turned into something that felt pretty fresh and pretty new, especially connected to the High Republic. It was a story that was more about probably one of the more character driven stories we've seen in the High Republic, which has been so grand in its scale. There's really about four characters in this book that really matter. And I enjoyed all of them. I thought all their perspectives were good. It was also interesting reading a book in the High Republic that was not completely from the perspective of Jedi. This is a story that is very much so from the perspectives of other characters. And there's pretty much one Jedi character in here who we get perspective from. And even he is more of a smaller character than our other two characters that are part of this Path of the Open Hand, which will be a recurring group throughout all of Phase Two. It seems like, and I enjoyed that. I was refreshed. I think with this phase to try something different, and I think it paid off. There's also, I think, the tone of this whole thing worked quite well. It starts very innocent and it kind of morphs into more of a thriller. I would say if you've seen many, types of cult thrillers or horror cult films, it plays a lot into that vibe. It's about, propaganda and imprinting your beliefs on younger people and how that type of stuff it pairs nicely too with the Jedi. I thought all of that, the connections between the two work. And I think the good that's at the heart of the Path of the Open Hand was something that was quite interesting to juxtapose with the good that's at the heart of the Jedi. Both want good things. It's completely opposite views on how to get there. And overall, I think if this phase continues in that direction and continues exploring what it's like to have a universe that's rich in force beliefs and force sensitive people and people who are interested in the force, Church of the Force, but not really given the ability to touch the force, there's a lot of ideas here that could really work, uh, and have not yet been explored really throughout canon or throughout Legends, or at least not in a unified way. And Legends, maybe just extraneous ideas. But I actually quite enjoyed a lot of the original ideas here, and I'm hoping that type of tone, that type of intrigue continues throughout phase two into what ultimately seems like a finale that will connect more to phase one than I think I originally thought. Let's talk about some of those characters, though. We have at the center of this whole thing the two Evereni characters. We have Marta Rowe and we have Yana Rowe. We also have Kevmo, the Jedi apprentice, who plays a big role. This is a young adult book, so most of the characters are either late teenagers, early 20s. And then we have kind of the extraneous characters who fill out the plot, like the mother and the herald from the Path of the Open Hand. So, were any of these characters standouts for you, and which characters and which arcs did you kind of enjoy the most throughout this book?
Mm, I'd say Marta Rowe was quite interesting to me. If there's anyone who's ever getting an origin story in this book, it seems like it's her character. She's someone who's so open to the Force, to what it signifies in terms of life and connection and all these things. But she's also part of the Path of the Open Hand, which is, to get slightly into spoiler territory, they don't believe that you should use the Force, because if you use the Force, you're taking it away from somewhere else, that you're disrupting it, you're totally using it, you're controlling it, which is very much against what a Jedi would believe in. The Jedi believes it's like a tool to be used. We are part of the Force. The Force can amplify you. The Force is not diminished by you taking it. So her character and her interactions with the Jedi were really appetizing for me. I found at times that I could see her being a little brainwashed, honestly. But at other times, I could truly see how her being a true believer, she does kind of fit into those religious types of people who truly believe in everything, and they have the compassion and they have the dedication to their beliefs and the people around them that you can't help but admire. I feel like every time I was reading about like what she was doing with the littles, talking to the elders, she's always trying to learn, and it was wonderful to see a character who despite her limitations, didn't hesitate to try her best. And I also like that this is one of the few High Republic stories with a romance that didn't feel so contrived to me. The romance, the flirtations, all that felt very charming. It feels young. It really does. But I really liked her and almost her justifications for pursuing some of her ideas and about romance and her needs. And I loved some of her denials too. I think that was also a very interesting part. What she suppresses also sometimes was motivating her in a lot of ways, which I thought was very cool. She was my standout character. I liked the other Jedi, the two Jedi. I liked the rest of the Path of the Open Hand, but I don't know. She was really fun to follow throughout the whole book.
I agree. I think she ends up being the standout character throughout the book, and I think it's one of the, without getting into spoilers, one of the tells about writing a great character is that she is the one I cared, not cared about the least, but was the least interested in what's going on with her, but became more and more and more fascinated by her as the story goes on, where the other characters might hook you more. Like Yana, her cousin has a great hook at the beginning. Her character is a really interesting character and does a lot more exciting, fascinating, cool, action-packed things. Kevmo's a Jedi, so we already have that automatic attachment and predisposition to like him. But Marta, especially choosing a name that is close to Markion, knowing her last name, knowing she's Evereni, knowing that she and Yana are going to be some type of forebearers to Markion in some way, knowing all of that and still getting attached to her as an individual character, I think was a credit to Gratton and Ireland, because this character I thought was really well written. One of the more developed, best written young adult characters in the High Republic so far, I think. And I'm very excited to see where she goes in the future. Other than that, I wouldn't say any of the characters truly stood out to me. Kevmo was, I felt like a really solid supporting character for Marta, and it took about halfway through the book for me to end up realizing that he is going to be kind of a supporting character for Marta. But I think still we do develop and get to learn a lot of stuff about Jedi and Jedi mindsets and Jedi philosophy at the time that this book takes place, about 350 years before Phantom Menace. So there's still a lot to learn about the Jedi and Jedi philosophy, but it's not as Jedi deep as you would expect a High Republic book to be. Yana, again, interesting character. I'm excited to see where all this stuff goes with the Evereni here in the future. And the mother stood out to me. I think the mother could come across as a pretty cliche cult leader, but I thought they did a good job giving her some interesting angles, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the Path of the Open Hand in general, the hierarchy, the structure, the political infighting within a group like this, all of that comes together here in the future. I think they have an opportunity to explore a cult in Star Wars, which we haven't really done much of, at least not from a perspective of like their base beliefs or something good. We've mostly explored dark side cults. So I think that juxtaposition between the corrupt and the people who truly believe in something that has a logical foundation in its beliefs will be interesting to explore in Star Wars, because we've never really done that. So all in all, I think all the stuff that was laid here with characters was quite good. So I think now is the time to move into overall thoughts and our scores out of 5. Sanak, I'm going to let you kick it off. What would you give this book out of 5?
I think it was a read that took me a little while to kind of get going into, like you said, especially with how innocent and sparsed out some of the initial chapters feel. But by the end, especially once we get to the end, once the investment in our of the characters is like fully there, some of the more shocking turns, well, relatively shocking turns in this book occur. I was very pleased that I got to read it. It was very absorbing of a read once it settled into its groove, and I'd give it a 4. I really think it was like a solid young adult book. It's hard to do better.
This book is a slow burn, I think, and it's a small book, so it's fast to get into, but the beginning chapters are pretty safe. as we get more and more into the book, I really, really started enjoying it. I enjoyed the pace. I enjoyed the angles. I enjoyed the characters. By the time it was over, I was very excited to read what's next in phase two. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas that can be explored here. I do think this might actually be my favorite young adult book in the High Republic, but I'm also going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think this was a really, really great start to the High Republic phase two, and it's got me excited for the future and what they could possibly do with this overall story. So thank you for watching. If you are going to click off after our non-spoiler thoughts, please, if you haven't yet, subscribe. It'll really, really help us out. We're almost to 1,000 subs. It'll definitely help us get into that algorithm, talk to more Star Wars fans like yourselves. Hit that like button as well and comment below and let us know what you thought of our thoughts on this book, or come back when you have read the book and let us know what you think of Path of Deceit. We're going to dive into spoilers right now, starting now. So obviously the ending is the main thing we're going to talk about here in spoilers, and it's kind of the thing we have to hold back on talking about, because I thought it was an exceptional ending. I thought it was really good. It completely engrossed me, and the last 10-15 chapters I was flying through. Really, really, really enjoyed the end and the connections to it. So let's just kick it off with the Leveler and the appearance of the Nameless in this book, which I was not expecting. What were your thoughts on the Nameless appearing and the Leveler, and really the whole ending of this book?
Yeah, I'd say like you, I found the last like 20 chapters just flying. Um, to me, it felt like the last couple of chapters are almost like epilogue-ish. Because once the Jedi are leveled and they leave in the Gaze Electric, which is like that was another shocking thing. Like, oh, it's being built here. Yeah, I mean, I think my expectations for this book were met because it took what I expected to happen, but presented them in a very different way. A lot of my expectations came from the Eye of the Storm comics. They kind of give a lot of that background to the Rose and the Evereni and the planet where the levelers come from. And we get like hints and connections to all those things. What I found very surprising is that even though we know these Evereni, this race of people, have been cruelly subjugated throughout the galaxy, kind of stereotyped, they also kind of lean into it. They do kill people without remorse. Yana is like Willie mentioned several times, like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill this guy for checking out my girlfriend." Like, I'm not joking. Like, I was like, "Oh, that's a strange thing to bring up," but it seems almost in their nature, except for Marta. And then the book ends with Marta like kind of becoming like a proto like Eye of the Storm almost, like before this whole structure is put in place, but she is like now she's usurped the mother's like spiritual leader position almost. Like it's a transition point. The mother also is weakened in some way and is asking for the other rod. Like there's some interesting developments of like the structure of the Nile before they're in the Nile. And I thought that was really cool. It's interesting to me that after kind of pointing out that these Nile and these in the comics, the Eye of the Storm, that they've always been kind of bad and they've survived being underground, but still being these aliens that everyone hate. That there's a potential for their story to be how they're shaped is actually because there was a member of their family who was trying to be good, who was trying to truly live up to her cult's ideals and her beliefs, and then with even with everything that went wrong, right? Instead of like feeling like, oh my God, I have to disconnect, right? It's like now it's like, nope, I'm even more committed. Everyone, these Jedi were wrong. Kevin was wrong. I feel bad for the boy, but I don't feel bad because he was a Jedi. It was like, those are like some stunning things that I thought kind of landed because of how much of a struggle she had. Uh, being that we're in the spoiler section, I thought Yana's whole role, like being like a Steve for the Path of the Open Hand, kind of helping fund taking all these artifacts, a Moraban, Korban, uh, knife, Sith knife, which I don't know if that's like a pseudo connection to the sequel trilogy with the Sith blade there. The fact that she's now like the ringleader for the levelers, the fact that these are like two separate positions is also very interesting. That these are rows, both rows, cousins, yes, but Now we have kind of how Markion was in Light of the Jedi before everything he fully usurped power. That's kind of what Marta's leading more into before becoming truly evil. And then the Leveler stuff, what Yana wrote, who was trying to leave because her girlfriend got killed because of the mother's plans and everything. Now that she's become like the Leveler's caretaker, the mother of these creatures, kind of feels like what Markion wrote was like for like the Rising Storm, when the Fallen Star, when he has those creatures at his full disposal. So it's very interesting to see what these two dynamics will be moving forward. That's probably the biggest thing I really enjoyed about like the ending, what it set up. And then it also makes the mother, who has always just been like, oh, peace be with you, oldest, even though she has more nefarious things. Now she's like a player to see like what is she gonna inevitably do because she feels upset that she's been usurped, that she's not in charge of this path, that she's not really their leader anymore. The whole power dynamic switching here, the fact that some of these roles are thrust onto these people, that Marta took on that role almost essentially, like after everything that was going on, after all these dealings with the Jedi, for them to become even more entrenched and involved in different ways was a really awesome ending. Those are all my thoughts. A lot of a ramble and jumble there, but the ending again, just a lot of potential for the structure and the development of the Nile as a whole.
That was by far the thing that got me most excited. Like just the politics of the whole thing, like the Herald talking with Yana about how they're going to usurp the mother versus the mother who's now, is she actually force sensitive? Like that was the question the entire book, but like we still don't know, and I think that's an interesting political thing to keep playing off of, because even Yana, who like hates the mother's guts, is like she might be force sensitive. I don't know. Like I kind of have to be careful here because she might have a power that I don't understand, but she might also be a fraud, and we don't really know. She's been lying to everybody, but is she lying about her actual powers? All of that, and then Marta's beliefs being transformed into something that can ultimately become violent because she misunderstands the way she lost her love interest, I think is a really interesting angle as well, and it's something that we I'm looking forward to exploring in Star Wars a bit more. I think I would hope that because a young adult book is the thing that kicked this whole thing off, that it is a more streamlined story this time. And as much as I enjoyed phase one of the High Republic, parts of it did tend to drag on. Parts of it felt like things were only created, like the Drengir, as much as they were cool, fun villains, they felt like they were only created to just kind of stretch the plot along, to give the comic something to fight, or to give this part something to fight. I would really enjoy it if almost every piece of phase two, especially because it's so short and doesn't have all these different waves, if it all is streamlined into like everything you read continues the plot, and even if the comics slowly continue the plot, or something, a junior novel adds a little fluff to it but slightly continues the plot, I would really enjoy it if at least the young adult and the adult books build off each other and continue something into a really grand finale. I think that would be really cool, and it would honestly be kind of the first Star Wars canon book series to do that, because High Republic, while big and expansive, phase one, I mean, it's not like Legacy of the Force or something like that, where every book
Yeah,
builds on each other, or Fate of the Jedi, every book builds on each other to a finale. Versus phase one was more like New Jedi Order, where you have your side stories and you have stuff like that going in different directions and tying in different areas. Both work for their own ways, but I'm excited to see what a creative team like this, who's so entrenched in this lore and trying to build up this lore, can do when focused on a streamlined story. I'm hoping this isn't just like a Justina Ireland, Tessa Gratton book, and then like phase one, we don't talk about these characters for a while again.
don't deal with it. Yeah.
I'm hoping it's all cycled through, because I thought this was a great start. I am very much so looking forward to the future. I think it's going to be a great one. Let us know down in the comments what you thought of this book and your spoilery thoughts now that we've gotten to it. Let us know down below. And again, if you haven't subscribed, it would really help us out. We're on the road to 1,000. Please subscribe if you are watching and you haven't. Also, like the video, and that will also help us out with the YouTube algorithm. And stay tuned for all of our Andor coverage. You're watching this on a Monday, hopefully when it drops. But if you aren't, We drop Andor reviews every Wednesday and predictions and speculation for the next episode of Andor every Friday. Check both of those releases out. We will also be having our recurring videos coming out every Monday, from specials to tier lists to Legends Book Club to Halloween specials. All of that type of stuff will be coming out on Mondays throughout the entire release of Andor. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.